Question from a reader. How do I stay irrevocably, unquestionably, consistently creating my vision and self-creation as a powerful coach such that the momentum of it moves me thoughtlessly into the future I am seeing? It's a well-considered question. It's a lot of words, but they all have a purpose. I get it. Irrevocably. How do I stay connected to this and don't give up on it? Unquestionably. How do I stay so connected to this and still consistent that I don't even question that I'm on the right path? And how do I stay consistent in this? The creating of my vision and the material outcomes that I want for my life, and self-creation, of the creation of myself as a powerful coach, the identity, the character, the way of being in the world, the role, the business, you could say, the action that produces those results, such that once I have this momentum, it continues to move me into that vision, that future, thoughtlessly. I like that word, thoughtlessly, as in I don't have to think about it. It just happens. So, as always, when I read a question, before I get to answering it, I'm looking at like, well, what are the ideas that are creating the question in the first place? And are there some ideas that are there that if they were different, you wouldn't even need to ask the question because the problem would go away? And so I think a lot of this irrevocable, unquestionable, it's a function of believing in this ideal of the perfectly disciplined human being who moves like a straight line through the world of chaos. And it's an ideal and it's a perfection, right? And it doesn't exist. And but when you believe that it does exist, then what happens is the time you spend questioning, or the feeling of revocability, is that a word? Gets you down because you feel as if you've fallen from grace of the ideal. You are not that perfect ideal, which that's the only way to get the result. So if I'm not that, then I'm not getting it. And it becomes this cascade of emotional failure. And I say this to answer I answer so many questions this way, which is like the question assumes an ideal that is problematic. And actually it's really problematic. It's not just like, oh, it's not a useful way of thinking about it. No, like really thinking about, really coming to terms with the fact that there is at least a subconscious part of me that is aspiring to an ideal, a way of functioning that is impossible to reach. And by measuring myself against that, I create an internal relationship with myself, which is that I'm always failing. And actually, like, you just got to relax. You just got to relax and see that the way that you show up, it's not perfect, and that's okay. And when you can be okay with not showing up perfectly, it's a lot easier to get back on the horse and keep riding. I swear to God, like the biggest factor in consistency is not having a problem with inconsistency, right? Like most people don't get back on the horse because they're so busy beating themselves up for falling off. So I always need to say that first, especially when I've got 17 adjectives before the word consistent, right? There's a lot of energy and a lot of desire in that, which is in part a pushback. I also think there's beauty in the possibility of like, I'm just so sure that I don't question. That's like a real radical certainty. So we can speak to that too, right? I don't have to throw the baby of the question out with the bathwater of the fear that is part of the creation of that question. So how do you live unquestionably? Let's say, for me, living with questionably, with like doubting things and I'm not so sure. Essentially, that's living with a certain pattern of thought, right? To think a question or to say to myself, I'm not sure, or to worry about something, whatever. It's a pattern of thinking. And so how do I live without any particular pattern of thinking? Well, you can't control what thought happens in this moment, but you do have influence over what thought arises later or tomorrow based on how you relate to the thought that arises in the moment of its arising. So, through meditation practice, for example, like this morning when I'm sit and I just watch my mind, the more time that I spend watching my mind arise the thought and let go of that thought and just watch it fade, the more I've conditioned the pattern of disassociating from my thinking and allowing it to just move through me. So that's a more of a more pervasive capacity to witness thought in general that is a good strength to have, to allow you to use that more surgically in relationship to particular thought patterns that happen, like questioning yourself, questioning your path. So as you become more aware of the pattern of questioning yourself or questioning your path, by a number of ways. How do you become more aware? It's like, well, I would sit down and actually ask myself, how am I questioning myself? What am I questioning? A practice of journaling or speaking out loud into a recorder and actually externalizing this thing that I have some awareness of that I do, making it really freaking clear, writing it down. Here's exactly the questions that I'm asking myself, and this is the tone of voice that I'm using or inside my head, right? These are the kinds of things that I literally say. Write them down, become super aware of them, post them up on a post-it. It's like, oh yeah, that thing. And then once you externalize it in your writing or on a post-it or something or in recording, what happens is that you're then more aware of it. It's kind of like if you buy a blue car, you see blue cars everywhere, you bring it into consciousness through the act of externalizing, and then you start to become more aware of it when it arises. That's important because it's only being aware of it when it arises that gives you the opportunity to then let it go. And how do you let it go? Just decide not to think that anymore. So that's where the meditation practice comes in, the capacity to zoom out from a thought, to see that I am not that thought, that it's something that's occurring inside me, and to release myself from it and watch it fade, watch it fall away. I have sometimes mental imagery like a big scissors or shears, and it's just like cutting the thought off, or like a volume knob on a stereo, and you just turn it all the way down till the thought can't be heard anymore, or just releasing it in an embodied way. You got to have your practice to disassociate yourself from thought in general, but then to use that surgically in relationship to the arising of the questioning thought. And if you do that, if you create a practice of letting go of when you question, you will live more unquestionably, because that's the space that remains as the habit of questioning subsides. Right? So you don't build up unquestionability. It's not like, I'm so certain because it's not like that. Unquestionably is something that lives in the space that remains in the absence of the habit of questioning. Okay? Such that the momentum of it moves me thoughtlessly into the future I am seeing. I mean, allowing yourself to act on the good patterns you've inculcated, allowing yourself to act without thinking, again, dropping the thought and just being in action. So there's a theme here. There's a theme of, I don't want to have to think my way into action, right? And so another way we could ask this question, how could I just be in action without thinking myself into action? Well, again, whether it's questioning, whether it's revoking, whether it's just thinking in general that's getting in the way that you don't want there, the practice of becoming aware of what those specific patterns of thought are, and then when you're aware of them arising in the moment, letting them go, not judging yourself for having the thought, just letting it go. Because look, you can't control the thought that happens now. You can only influence the thought arising later or tomorrow or the next week, next day, whatever. So letting go of those, yes, that's the foundation. But then the sun is just arising. Maybe the light on my face is changing. It's literally directly behind the camera and blinding me. It's arising over the volcano I live on, which is called in Hawaiian Haleakala, which means house of the sun, because the sun rises out of this volcano, the house the sun lives in. So that's pretty cool. That's happening like literally right behind the camera. So there's the clearing and the space that's important. But then the other thing that you can do is you can inculcate some kind of habit or pattern that creates a worldview or an identity in which you take action in the absence of thought, without the requirement of thought. And so, because action is a response to circumstance, right? Either the circumstance of internally or externally. Something, you wake up for the day. There's work. There's a calendar in front of you, and there's a task list, or there's something. There's an empty journal, and there's a pen sitting next to it. There's something there. There's a circumstance, and then you meet that circumstance, and a possibility for action arises, and then you can start thinking about it, or you can just act. And this is why one of the patterns that I've created around my identity is I am immediate action. That's who I am. That's what I am. It's just so true to me. I've been speaking it and actualizing it for years. And so when I see the possibility for an action, I can either think about it or I can just act on it. and creating the idea of myself, the identity of myself as a person who, when there's an opportunity for action, I act instead of think. What happens is that I'm in action more often and thinking less. And so we both want to allow practice. In summary, we want to practice dropping thoughts, which we can do by developing keen awareness around the particular thought patterns that are getting in the way, journaling, externalizing them in some way, and then applying our conscious capacity to witness thought instead of being entangled in it, which we develop through meditation, to then let go of those particular types of thoughts and let them fade away. That practice will will dehabituate the arising of that thought as a pattern, not in the moment, but later. Every time you do that, it's like if I brush my teeth today, it's not like boom, cavities are gone or all the plaque is gone. But if I brush my teeth regularly, I'm gonna have clean teeth over time, right? So it's like that. And in parallel with that, I would say secondarily to that, because that would be the foundation. Secondarily to that, it's inculcating a relationship to circumstances and opportunities in which when I see them or they arise or they show up, I act. That's what I do. I don't think, I act. So if you get those two things in line, you're going to have a lot more consistency arising. It doesn't make you a more lovable person. It doesn't mean that you're going to hit the illusory ideal of perfectly unquestionably irrevocable. I love it. Consistency, but you will be more consistent, and there will be more momentum, and you move more quickly towards the future you're seeing. Thank you for asking. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for reading. Stick around for more. I love you. I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.